When I first started my podcast, I was living like Bob. I was having highs and lows, and that was dictating how much output I had. Some days I would post like 10 to 20 pieces of content. The next week, maybe none. And even for season 1 of the Personal Process podcast, like sometimes the guest would be booked literally the day before. I'd record the episode, and within a day, it had to be published. So it would be very last minute. It stressed me out. It would cause me to feel burnt out. And, it's something that wasn't the best thing to do. There was no consistent schedule. There was no real direction to where I was going. I had a kind of an idea, but now that I'm using systems after learning this from a business coach, I'm able to have dedicated time to make sure I know what happens when. Beyond this, I'm able to plan my content so everything flows together. Welcome back to the Personal Process Podcast. Have you ever found yourself wanting to start a creative endeavor or business and found that desire dissipates in a few days or weeks? In today's episode, we're going to be discussing why motivation is temporary and why systems are forever. So, what is motivation? Motivation is a feeling or a desire to achieve something, usually something difficult or something worthwhile for achieving for an individual. The point that I want you to focus on here is that it is a feeling, a transient emotion that is within our body. Now, to illustrate this, I'm going to use my friend Bob, just a figurative example, just to reel this in. So Bob is a world traveler. He's traveled to 10 different countries, and his friends always tell him, Bob, you should start a blog. And he says, I don't know about that. I'm not feeling like it. And although he has all this experience, he's basing his workflow, he's basing his life just on these transient feelings. So what ends up happening is a few months later, Bob recently got a promotion. He is now the manager at his job. Beyond this, the individual who Bob was, crushing on for a long time asked him to dinner. So Bob's feeling like $1 million. What ends up happening? Well, now he's feeling great about himself, and he decides to finally start his blog. And it's going great. For the first day, he's pumping out 2 articles. His friends are like, see, Bob, I told you, you really should have started that blog. And he's like, yeah, I know. I'm pretty good at this, aren't I? And, beginner's luck, he's doing pretty well for himself. He's getting hundreds of views in the first day with like 0 marketing. Now, as the days go on, he still pumps out creative content for about 2 times a week for the first 5 days. And the weekend comes along, and his friends are like, Bob, you're doing great. You should come out with us to celebrate. We're going to a night on the town. And Bob says, you know what? I deserve this. So he goes out. He stays up late. He has 1 too many drinks. And what ends up happening is that Bob is now very exhausted the next day. He is a bit hungover, and he doesn't have that drive and motivation to do his regular activities. He's groggy, and today he says, you know what? I've worked so hard. I'll take it a little bit easier today. He writes half an article, and that's it. The next day, he says, I'll take a break from this. And he stops his train. What ends up happening is within the next couple of months, he finishes 1 to 2 articles, and it's very, random. There is no consistent spot where he publishes content every single week. The readers don't have anything to look forward to, and as a result, it drops off. And so does Bob's passion project, his blog. But what if it didn't need to be like this? What if there was a way so these feelings wouldn't control our output, wouldn't control our, ventures? Well, that's where systems come in. Systems from a business standpoint are a set of procedures, principles, or ideas applied to a specific activity to attain a specific goal. To illustrate this, let's use another blogger, Brad. So Brad, unlike Bob, is an avid hockey player. He has won provincials in his high school, and he watches the Canucks, Vancouver reppin'. And he attends every game. He gives a play-by-play analysis on his blog and does this because he's passionate about it, but also because he has the discipline to go about it. See, one of the differences between Brad and Bob is that Brad actually has a set schedule of when he's going to be working on his tasks, what he's going to be doing in those hours, and this is something that he doesn't want to break. So, for example, now if they have a night on the town and Brad's friends are like, hey, you should come out, you've been working really hard, we're going to celebrate my birthday. And, that girl that you like, Jessica, she's going to be there too. So Brad, although that he likes Jessica, he knows that he has his business hours to work in. And although that his business hours finish up before the end of the night, he knows that if he is going to go out that late of the night, the next day is going to be affected. His productivity is going to be decreased. His ability to do deep work decreases. And due to that, he decides not to go out. And although this leads into a transient loss for the day, let's fast forward 10 years. Bob has written those 10 articles and maybe another 3 in the months coming, whereas Brad, he's now founded a journalism company that covers not only hockey, but all the major league sports. He's happy, he is content with his life, and he's built something from his constant dedication. Do you want to be like Brad or do you want to be like Bob? The choice is hopefully apparent that living a life like Brad, where giving up these certain things that we'd like to have temporarily for a bigger, greater goal in the long term will serve us well. But, I've actually had the experience of living in both of these, examples. When I first started my podcast, I was living like Bob. I was having highs and lows, and I was dictating how much output I had. Some days I would post like 10 to 20 pieces of content. The next week, maybe none. And even for season 1 of the Personal Process podcast, like sometimes the guests would be booked literally the day before. I'd record the episode, and within a day it had to be published. So it would be very last minute. It stressed me out. It would cause me to feel burnt out. And, it's something that wasn't the best thing to do. There was no consistent schedule. There was no real direction to where I was going. I had a kind of an idea, but now that I'm using systems, after learning this from a business coach, I'm able to have dedicated time to make sure I know what happens when. Beyond this, I'm able to plan my content so everything flows together. One thing that you may have been noticing on my Instagram, and if you haven't checked it out, here's a little quick plug. Check out the link in the bio. Is it's a lot more consistent. I have about 1 post a day, usually alternating between quotes and reels from the podcast episode, so there's a preview on it. And what this has done for me is it's just increased my audience. People know to expect that kind of content from me, and it helps me get other listeners. It's also just helped me feel better about myself. I think before I was riding those highs and lows, and that would dictate how I feel about my productivity, about my work with a podcast. But now that I'm working on those days that I don't want to work, I feel a lot more happier. I feel more confident. I feel, is powerful a good word to use here? This is how I feel though. And I think that if everyone used these things, it would really benefit them. So what are the main things that I have implemented personally that have made my life easier through systems? The one thing is by having goals for every week. I need to make sure I hit X, Y, and Z. By having this, I have a clear direction of where I'm going. The next thing is by having boundaries. After reflecting through journaling, I found out that, similar to Brad, nights out were the thing that were really harming me. And regardless of the activity that happened for me, just by staying out past my normal bedtime, quote unquote, I would be very groggy. I wouldn't feel like doing anything else. And even if I were to step in and do the work, it would be much less quality and quantity as well. I wouldn't be able to do as much. So I decided to have a set boundary that if there's a day that I'm working, the night before I'm going to bed at least by minimum 12 a.m., ideally a little bit earlier. But that is one thing that is something that I have incorporated into my own life. The next thing is by having a set schedule. This set schedule is important because if we don't know when we're working, there's going to be no drive. And when you have a set schedule, you don't have to think about, okay, I have to do work now, because that is one action that is maybe going to be something that makes you resist going to work. But if you know you have work from 6 to 9 p.m. from Tuesday to Saturday, you will go to it, you will get the job done, and you'll just have an easier time managing everything you have to do. You'll feel better about yourself, and ultimately you will succeed. Because it's not about your ultimate, abilities at the start. It's about that consistent work ethic. And I think for today's episode, I want to end up with a quote from Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And I'm just going to pull that up on my phone here. The quote that he mentioned is that success isn't always about greatness. It's about consistency. Consistent hard work leads to success. Greatness will come. Success isn't always about greatness. It's about consistency. Consistent hard work leads to success. Greatness will come. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. So I think if we've taken anything from this episode today, try not to use these feelings of feeling like you need to do something to go for it. Try to have dedicated systems, because we can't control the feelings that we have in our life, but we can control what we do with our time. So schedule it in a calendar, set your boundaries the way that you'd like it, and make a life that you'd want to live. With that said, thank you for joining another episode of the Personal Process Podcast. We hope you got value from this. And if you did, please make sure to subscribe, rate this video or podcast, and let a friend or two know if you think they would get value from this as well. Thank you so much and have a great day. Cheers.